3 years ago, I wired $340,000 to a stranger for a building full of washing machines. No branding, no app, no investors, no press release, just 28 machines, a cracked parking lot, and a landlord who'd been trying to sell the place for 2 years because nobody wanted it. Everybody I told thought I'd lost my mind. My own accountant asked me twice if I was sure. Here's what I didn't say back then because it would have sounded insane. I ran the numbers for 6 weeks before I bought it, and by week 3, I already knew it was going to work. Not because I got lucky, because almost nobody else was willing to do the boring math I did. Today, I'm walking you through the actual economics, the real purchase price, the cost nobody warns you about, the mistake that almost cost me the whole thing in month 4, and the number that finally convinced me this was one of the best decisions I've made. Not the sanitized version you see in passive income videos, the real one with the ugly parts left in. If you've ever driven past a laundromat and wondered who actually owns that and whether they're making any money, and this is that answer. Let's get the obvious question out of the way first. Why a laundromat? Out of every business that exists, here's the honest answer. I wasn't looking for a laundromat specifically. I was looking for a business with 3 things: demand that doesn't depend on the economy, a customer base that shows up on autopilot, and an owner who was tired enough to sell it for less than it was worth. Laundromats hit all 3 almost by accident. People don't stop washing clothes in a recession. They don't stop washing clothes because a competitor opened a nicer laundromat 2 miles away. Most customers pick the one closest to home and never think about it again. And critically, most laundromat owners are in their 60s and 70s. They've been running the same location for 20 or 30 years, and they are exhausted, not broke. Exhausted. That combination, a tired seller and a boring, resilient business, is where the good deals live. Now, the second decision, and this one matters more than people think, I bought an existing laundromat instead of building one from scratch. I've talked about this on the channel before. Recurring revenue businesses typically sell for 3 to 5 times their annual profit versus 1 to 2 times for businesses built on one-off sales. A laundromat is about as recurring as revenue gets. So buying one wasn't just faster, it was financially the smarter move because I was buying 26 years of proven foot traffic instead of gambling on whether a new location would ever build that same trust. Building one from scratch would have meant permits, plumbing inspections, gas line installation, and roughly 18 months before a single customer walked in. The buying meant the machines were already running. The regulars already had their routine and the revenue started on day one, my day one, not some hypothetical grand opening day 3 years in the future. That's the trade-off almost nobody talks about when they daydream about owning a laundromat. You're not choosing between build and buy. You're choosing between 18 months of zero income while you find out if the location works, or an immediate income stream with a known track record. I know which one I'd pick every time. I looked at 11 laundromats before I bought this one, 11. Most people who want to buy a laundromat look at maybe 2, get discouraged by the first one that looks rough, and give up. That's a mistake because the good deals are almost never the clean, obvious ones. The first thing I learned, business brokers list maybe a third of the laundromats that are actually for sale. The other 2/3 are owned by people who haven't even admitted to themselves they want out yet. So a huge part of finding this deal wasn't browsing listings, and it was driving around, walking into laundromats, and just asking the person behind the counter or calling the number on the door whether the owner had ever thought about selling. Most said no. One said, "How did you know?" That's the one I bought. The owner, I'll call him Frank, had run the place for 26 years. His knees were bad. He was doing the coin collection route himself twice a week, and he genuinely dreaded it. He wasn't hiding financial problems. The place was profitable, just tired, both literally and in terms of upkeep. Half the machines were older models. The paint hadn't been touched since the Clinton administration. And the sign out front had a burnt out letter that had been burnt out for at least 3 years because I asked him. Here's the part that matters for the math, because the place looked tired. Almost nobody else was interested. I wasn't competing against other buyers. I was competing against Frank's own inertia, his reluctance to deal with the paperwork of selling. That gave me negotiating room that I never would have had on a laundromat that looked freshly renovated and had 6 interested buyers already circling it. Lesson, and I'll say this plainly because it applies to every business on this list, not just laundromats. The best deals look slightly bad from the outside. If a business looks great in the listing photos, you're paying full price and competing with everyone else who saw the same photos. If it looks tired, but the fundamentals are sound, the machines run, the location has foot traffic, the books are honest, that's where the discount lives. I asked Frank for 2 years of bank statements, not his own summary numbers. People's memory of their own business is almost always optimistic. The bank statements don't lie. That's step 1 of due diligence for any small business, and it's the step most first-time buyers skip because it feels awkward to ask. Here are the real numbers, not rounded for a thumbnail. Purchase price, $340,000 for the business, the equipment, and a 10-year lease on the building with 2 5-year renewal options. I didn't buy the real estate. Frank didn't own the building either. He'd been leasing it the whole 26 years. That's actually common in this industry, and it kept my upfront number lower than if I'd had to buy land and construction too. I put down $85,000 of my own money. That's 25%, and finance the rest through an SBA loan at just under 10% interest over 10 years. That put my monthly loan payment at a little over $3,300. Keep that number in your head because it's going to matter a lot when we get to the profit math. 28 washers and dryers came with the deal, ranging from 6 months old to about 11 years old. Part of my due diligence was getting a technician, not Frank, an independent technician I paid out of pocket to inspect every single machine and give me an honest estimate of remaining life. 4 machines were flagged as replace within a year. I used that inspection to negotiate $18,000 off the asking price. That's real money that came directly out of doing one extra step. Almost nobody does, paying a stranger a few $100s to tell you the truth about the equipment instead of trusting the seller's word. The lease itself, $4,200 a month on a 5,000 square foot space in a working class residential neighborhood, 3 blocks from a large apartment complex and 2 blocks from a strip of small restaurants. Location matters here in a very specific way I didn't fully appreciate until I owned the place. It's not about visibility from a main road. It's about walking distance from dense housing where a meaningful percentage of residents don't have in-unit laundry. That's the customer base, not people driving in, people walking 2 or 3 blocks with a cart. Total cash I needed to close, including the down payment, closing costs, an emergency reserve fund, and the first month of operating expenses before revenue normalized right around $110,000. I want to be honest about something here because too many of these videos gloss over it. $110,000 is not start a business with almost no money. This wasn't a $500 vending machine. This was a real acquisition that required real capital or a real loan or both. If you're watching this hoping for a version where the laundromat costs $3,000, that's not this business. That's part of why it's a good business. The capital requirement itself keeps most competitors out. I expected the first month to be about learning the machines. It wasn't. It was about learning the people. The regulars at a laundromat are creatures of habit in a way that genuinely surprised me. Same people, same days, same machines. Several of them had an unofficial their machine. And if someone else was using it, they'd wait rather than use a different one. I learned this the hard way when I put an out of service sign on machine 14 for a routine repair, and three different regulars asked me with real concern what happened to it. That sounds trivial, but it taught me something important about this business model. The product isn't really a place to wash clothes. The product is a routine that people have built their week around. Tuesday and Friday mornings, same time, same machine, sometimes the same conversation with the same other regular. My job wasn't to reinvent that. My job was to not break it. The second surprise, cash handling was a much bigger part of daily operations than I expected, even with the card readers I'd installed on 12 of the 28 machines within the first month. Coin collection twice a week took close to 3 hours each time, so opening every machine's coin box, counting, rolling coins for the bank, or paying a coin counting service a percentage to do it for me. I chose the service. It cost about 4% of the coin revenue, but it gave me back 6 hours a week. And coin theft, which does happen more than people admit, became someone else's liability to prevent, not mine. The third surprise, and this one stung a little, 2 machines broke down in the first 6 weeks. Not the ones the technician had flagged, different ones. A commercial washer, when it breaks, is not a $200 repair. One of those 2 repairs came in at $1,100 for a bearing replacement on a top-load commercial washer. That's the kind of cost that doesn't show up in anyone's "look how passive this income is" narrative. And it's exactly why I want to walk you through the full cost structure next in detail, because this is where most people's mental math about laundromats is wrong. Here's what the laundromat actually brings in on average month to month in a typical month with no major disruptions. Coin and card revenue from the machines themselves. This is the core of the business, and it runs between $13,000 and $16,000 a month, depending on the season. Yes, seasonal laundromats see a real dip in the summer when people do smaller loads more often instead of big weekly loads, and a bump in late fall and winter when heavier clothing and blankets need washing. Wash and fold service. This is the add-on Frank never offered, and it's the first thing I introduce. Customers drop off a bag of laundry. I have 2 part-time employees wash, dry, and fold it, and they pick it up the next day. This service alone brings in an additional $2,200 to $3,000 a month at a markup that's honestly better than the machine revenue itself, because I'm charging for convenience, not just for machine time. Vending machines. I installed 2 snacks and drinks in the space that used to just be an empty wall by the folding tables. That's not going to make anyone rich. It nets about $180 to $240 a month, but it's revenue from square footage that was previously worth exactly 0. A card-operated laundry locker system, which I added in year 2, lets customers drop off laundry after hours and pick it up whenever, paying through an app. That's a newer income layer, still growing, currently around $400 a month, but the ceiling on that is much higher as more regulars adopt it. Total gross revenue in an average month, somewhere between $16,000 and $20,000. I want to pause here because this is exactly the number that gets thrown around in thumbnails. Laundromat makes $18,000 a month, and it's technically true and almost completely misleading because gross revenue is not profit. Nobody puts the next section in the thumbnail because it's less exciting, but it's the part that actually determines whether this business makes sense for you. This is the section I wish someone had shown me before I bought the place, because I had to learn most of it by living through a full year of bills. Loan payment, $3,300 a month, fixed for 10 years, not negotiable, not seasonal, due whether business is good or bad that month. Lease, $4,200 a month with a built-in 3% annual increase written into the contract. That's worth checking in any lease you're evaluating. A lease that looks affordable today can creep meaningfully over a 10-year term. Utilities, and this is the one people underestimate the most: water, gas for the dryers and water heater, and electricity together run between $3,800 and $4,600 a month. And this is genuinely the largest variable cost in the business. Water and gas prices went up almost 20% over my first 2 years of ownership. And that increase came straight out of margin, because you can't exactly pass a mid-month utility hike onto a customer paying by the quarter in a coin slot without repricing the machines, which I did do once carefully, and which I'll talk about in a minute. Payroll, 2 part-time employees. In paying for the wash and fold service and general upkeep, roughly $2,400 a month combined. Insurance, commercial liability plus equipment coverage, about $410 a month. Repairs and maintenance. This is the line item that varies the most and surprises people the most. Budgeted average is $600 to $900 a month, but real months range from $150 when nothing breaks to over $2,000 in a month when a major machine fails. Over a full year, it averages out, but any single month can look alarming if you're not prepared for the variance. Coin counting service fee, roughly 4% of coin revenue, averaging around $400 to $500 a month. Miscellaneous supplies, the occasional vandalism, repair, signage, cleaning products, call it $300 a month on average. Add all of that up, and total monthly operating costs land between roughly $15,400 and $16,800 in a typical month. Now, do the math against that. $16,000 to $20,000 gross revenue number from the previous section. Net profit in a good month is around $3,500 to $4,500. In a rough month, a big repair, a slow summer week, a utility spike, it can drop to $1,500 or even break even. That is a real net margin somewhere around 15 to 22%, not the 35% figure that gets quoted in generic laundromat business articles online, which are usually describing a business with no debt service because the previous owner paid off their loan a decade ago. If you're buying the business today with a fresh loan, your real margin looks like mine, not the debt-free version from an article written about someone else's 20-year-old paid-off laundromat. I'm telling you this not to talk you out of it. I'm telling you this because the version of this business that actually shows up in your bank account is the 15 to 22% version. And if you go in expecting 35%, month 4 is going to feel like a betrayal instead of just normal. I want to tell you about month 4 because I think the sanitized version of this story is more common on this channel's kind of content than it should be. And I don't want to be another one of those. In month 4, I made a decision that nearly wiped out 4 months of profit in a single week. I decided to renovate, a new paint, new signage, replacing that one burnt out letter, upgrading the folding tables all at once during what I thought was a slow week. I hired a contractor, agreed to a price, and didn't get a second quote because the first one sounded reasonable, and I was excited to finally fix the place up. The renovation took 9 days instead of the promised 4 because the contractor was juggling another job at the same time and hadn't told me that during those 9 days, half the machines were inaccessible because of scaffolding and equipment blocking the floor. My regulars, the same creatures of habit regulars I mentioned earlier, didn't wait around. A good number of them found a different laundromat 12 minutes away. And this is the part that actually scared me. Some of them didn't come back even after the renovation finished. The direct cost of the renovation itself was about $9,000. The indirect cost, the lost revenue during those 9 days, plus roughly 3 months of depressed traffic while I slowly won back some of those regulars through a We're Back and Better flyer campaign and a temporary discount. I estimate cost me closer to $14,000 total when you add it all up. Here's the mechanic I want you to take from this because it applies far beyond laundromats. In a habit based business, disruption is more expensive than it looks on paper. The renovation itself was a reasonable investment. The way I executed it all at once without a contingency plan, without getting a second contractor quote, without staggering it to keep at least half the machines running at all times, turned a good decision into an expensive lesson. If I did it again, I'd renovate in phases, keep at least 70% of machines operational at every point, and get 2 contractor bids minimum with a penalty clause for late completion written into the contract. I didn't know to ask for any of that the first time. Now I do, and it's a cheap lesson to give you for free instead of an expensive one to learn yourself. 3 years in, here's where things stand. Average net profit has climbed from that rough first year range of $1,500 to $4,500 a month up to a steadier $5,200 to $6,800 a month, mostly from the wash and fold service maturing, the locker system growing, and simply not making another renovation style mistake. Annual net profit averaged across a full year, including the slow months, right around $70,000. Remember what I said earlier in the channel and what applies directly here. Recurring revenue businesses typically sell for 3 to 5 times annual profit. At $70,000 a year, this laundromat, if I sold it today, would likely go for somewhere between $210,000 and $350,000 on top of the equity I've already built by paying down the loan for 3 years. That means the equipment, the lease position, and 3 years of proven recession-resistant cash flow are worth roughly what I paid for the whole thing initially, even after extracting real income the entire time I've owned it. That's the version of boring business math that doesn't show up in exciting thumbnails because it's not exciting. It's just reliably, quietly good. I'm not going to tell you this is right for everyone because it isn't, and I'd rather lose a subscriber than sell you something that doesn't fit your situation. This makes sense if you have access to somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 in capital or financeable capital. You're comfortable with the idea of a fixed loan payment that doesn't care how your month went. And you're the kind of person who finds satisfaction in small, steady, unglamorous improvements rather than needing constant novelty. This does not make sense if you need fast returns, if you don't have the reserve capital to survive a bad repair month without panicking, or if the idea of coin collection, minor vandalism, and the occasional 11 p.m. call about a flooded floor sounds like your personal nightmare instead of an acceptable cost of doing business. There is no version of this that is fully passive. Anyone telling you a laundromat runs itself with zero attention has never owned one. What it is, honestly, is low frequency effort, a few hours a week once the systems and part-time staff are in place instead of a full-time job. That is a very different promise than passive, and I'd rather tell you the honest version. If you've watched the other video on this channel, you know I judge every business idea against one filter, the 3 a.m. test. If you were unreachable for 48 hours, would this still generate money without you? That's the laundromat mostly passes it. The machines run whether I'm there or not. The part-time staff handle the wash and fold. The coin counting service handles cash without me touching it, but it doesn't fully pass it. If a major machine breaks and nobody's watching the group chat with my technician, that's lost revenue accumulating in real time. It's closer to a 90% pass than a 100% pass. And I think that's actually the honest ceiling for most physical location-based businesses. Full passivity is rare. What you're really optimizing for is how much of your personal attention the business demands per dollar of profit. And on that measure, this business earns its place on the list. The other lesson, and this is the one I keep coming back to, the tired seller, not the shiny listing, is where the deal lives. Frank wasn't hiding anything. He was just tired of a business he'd stopped being excited about a decade before he sold it. That exhaustion was the entire discount, Nobody else was willing to look past the burnt out sign letter and the old paint to see 26 years of proven foot traffic underneath it. I get asked constantly whether I do it again, knowing everything I know now. The honest answer is yes, and I do it faster. So I spent 6 weeks second guessing numbers I already knew were solid because the idea of wiring 6 figures to a stranger for a building full of washing machines still felt strange. Even with the math in front of me, that hesitation is normal. Almost everyone feels it right before they do something boring and profitable, because boring doesn't come with the social permission that exciting ideas get. Nobody's going to throw you a party for buying a laundromat. But 3 years later, nobody's throwing Frank a party either, and he's the one who spent 26 years building the thing I get to benefit from now. If you're sitting on capital and searching for the big idea, I gently push back on that search. The big idea isn't usually a new idea. It's an old, tired business owned by someone who's ready to hand it to someone with fresh energy and an honest set of numbers. If this breakdown was useful, or if you have looked at buying a laundromat yourself and have questions the video didn't cover, put them in the comments. And I read every one. And if there's enough interest, I'll do a full walkthrough of how I structured the SBA loan next. Subscribe if you want to see the next deep dive. I'm already 3 weeks into evaluating a self-storage facility, and I'll show you the real numbers on that one too, good or bad.